Many fantasy shows have tried to be the next Game of Thrones, but one 6-season sci-fi series should have been its true successor. Game of Thrones is a fantasy show everyone should watch at least once, as it completely changed the genre. It demonstrated that a high fantasy show could be successful with mainstream audiences, and it inspired many networks and streamers to try their hand at similar projects. Sadly, series like The Wheel of Time, The Rings of Power, and The Witcher have never quite taken off like the HBO hit. While many fantasy shows tried to copy Game of Thrones, there's one sci-fi series that had the potential to be its true replacement. Not only did it have the scope and complexity HBO's adaptation became known for, but it also came from a lengthy book series with a large and dedicated fan base. And this sci-fi series did earn a lot of praise during its 6-season run. However, it didn't become as recognizable as Game of Thrones, with a few factors contributing to that. The Expanse should have been Game of Thrones' replacement, not another fantasy show. The scope, politics, and lengthy source material made it an ideal successor. Although a few fantasy shows originally seemed like strong contenders, Prime Video's The Expanse was probably the most likely candidate to become the next Game of Thrones. Based on the book series of the same name, written by author duo James S. A. Corey, The Expanse had a lot going for it. Spanning 9 books in total, the source material accumulated a committed fan base, making it nearly as culturally relevant in the sci-fi sphere. This also ensured it had plenty of source material to work with, though The Expanse show didn't end up adapting all the books. In addition to coming from similarly long and popular source material, The Expanse boasted a complex world and political themes that were perfect for those who enjoyed Game of Thrones. Though less gruesome and explicit, even the sci-fi show's realistic approach to its storytelling was reminiscent of the HBO series' take on its fantasy setting. Despite the major differences between the two series, their genres setting them apart instantly, they had a lot in common. Had The Expanse managed to gain the same traction as the fantasy series, it might have been considered its successor. Why The Expanse never reached the heights of HBO's fantasy series? It lacked a few things that helped Game of Thrones. Cass Anvar and Amp, Stephen Strait in The Expanse Season 3. While The Expanse had the potential to be Game of Thrones' true successor, it never reached the heights of HBO's fantasy series, at least not in terms of wide-scale success. Its impressive 95% Rotten Tomatoes score speaks to its quality, as well as the fact that it was critically acclaimed throughout its run. But it never became the driver of water-cooler discussions in the same way Game of Thrones did, and that could be chalked up to a few things. For one, sci-fi has seen a huge resurgence in recent years. One only needs to look at Apple TV+'s approach to the genre to see that, but the category wasn't as big when The Expanse debuted back in 2015. While Star Trek has maintained its cult following, and some other sci-fi series managed to grow, the genre mostly appealed to a more niche audience. That was true of fantasy before Game of Thrones, too, but The Expanse didn't draw viewers who weren't otherwise interested in sci-fi, while the HBO show hooked newcomers. Additionally, The Expanse started on SYFY and then moved to Prime Video, and this may have prevented it from reaching a larger audience. HBO has brand recognition and fewer restrictions when it comes to budget. Viewers expect quality content from the network, regardless of genre. But SYFY caters more to the audience that's already watching sci-fi shows, making newcomers less likely to tune in. And Prime Video was a smaller streaming service at the time, and it hadn't adopted weekly release models when The Expanse first moved. All these details meant its earlier seasons didn't stay front of mind.